Enemies. I have been working on Exo Colony for over a year, and whenever I played or tested the game, all I had to fear were bugs and glitches. This needs to change, so I decided to put some vicious creatures into this otherwise peaceful world, and also a way to get rid of them. I also implemented another secret Discord feature voted by the community on my Discord server. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the devlog. Before I started to work on some mighty fine enemies, I wanted to tackle another task first. You might remember that I added a building mode to the game, but it lacked the functionality of placing buildings which are bigger than 1x1 tiles. I finally forced myself to finish this part of the feature, and after some headaches, very long programming sessions and 1 or 2 smaller bugs, I got it working. So, with this out of the way, it was time to work on something new. I had the idea of adding enemies to the game for quite some time, but I wasn't sure how I wanted the enemies to act and also how I wanted the player character to fight them. Now it wouldn't make much sense if the enemies would attack the player directly, since a real-time fighting system on a grid map is not really that entertaining. So I had another idea. How about the enemies are just out there trying to eat all the items on the floor? Then, to get rid of these enemies, the player has to either protect their stuff or build some kind of weapon machinery. I liked this idea, and so I started to design a possible enemy and a sprite. My first approach was to create a really simple and clean looking kind of cube enemy which would act and move like a cliché slime type enemy, but looks more sci-fi since a cubic shape is obviously more sci-fi-esque than a fantasy slime shape. Makes sense, right? After I had some animations done, I threw them into Unity to see how they look. Actually quite good in my opinion, so my next job was to make them move, which was a bit more interesting. To make an AI controlled unit inside the game move to a specific grid tile, I had to implement some kind of pathfinding. Now there is a very popular pathfinding algorithm, especially for a grid or graph based movement. A star. I will not explain how this algorithm works in detail, but if you're interested, I'll link a very good explanation video in the description. Now, it took me a bit to wrap this around my grid system, but after some hours of coding, I got it working to some degree. Here I visualized the generated path with some Unity gizmo graphics, and you can see how it works almost correctly. After some bug fixing, I got rid of the enemy trying to move through stuff, and then I also made it so that other units like the player can interrupt the path, which allowed for some high quality trolling gameplay. At this time, during development, I decided to change my usual workflow and to move the secret Discord feature forward, since I needed a break from working on the enemy AI behavior system. So, as always, I asked the lovely people on my Discord server to vote for a smaller feature, visual effect, or piece of content I should add to the game. This time, the community had to choose between a new crop, footsteps visual effects, a wooden fence, or sounds for the alien chicken and jetpack. And the winner of this devlog secret Discord feature vote is the wooden fence. How fitting, since a fence should be the perfect tool to protect your mighty fine crops and items from evil enemies. So I jumped right into a sprite and started to draw the necessary sprites. Implementing the fence in Unity was actually super easy peasy, since it works almost exactly like the bridge, except it's not supposed to be built on water and also on another layer, but besides that almost exactly the same. So here we go, a nice wooden fence for the whole family to enjoy. Back to our enemies. Now that the cube dudes are smart enough to follow a simple path, I decided to throw some more AI in the form of a state machine onto them. The state machine's logic was quite simple. Enemies are just randomly moving around, and then they are also checking after every movement if there's some tasty cube food in range. If that's the case, the state switches to food hunting, and the enemies are using the pathfinding functionality to move towards the goal, which they would then start to eat, if possible. Here you can see how a bunch of savage cube dudes are eating all of the player's starting items. How rude. And now they're eating all of the crops. Very impolite. So, how do we get rid of them? I had an idea. Inspired by the old school RTS franchise Command & Conquer, I thought of a quite fitting weapon type. Tesla coils. I could connect them to the power system, and then they would shoot on cube dudes in range. Simple and effective. So, time to jump back into a sprite once again. There we go. Adding the Tesla coil into Unity and connecting it to the power system was not too difficult, but then I also wanted the laser projectile to look super cool. So I did some research on laser shaders and scrambled something together in Shader Graph. In combination with some nice particles and post-processing, it actually looked pretty neat. I like this mix of pixel art and high-res visual effects quite a lot, but now I'm curious, how do you like it? Please tell me in the comments. And while you're at it, consider subscribing to this channel and hit that like button. Now all that was left were some sound effects. Turns out there are actually a lot of free sound effects for all kinds of lasery stuff available. So let's have a look and a listen at how this Tesla coil turns these evil cube dudes into dust. Very snappy. As a finishing touch for this whole feature, I also drew and implemented an enemy spawner, so that enemies are deployed into the world on a regular basis, but it also checks that there is only a maximum number of enemies in the world at the same time. This is only a placeholder though, and will very likely change in the future. If you have any ideas how I could elaborate on this feature, feel free to drop me your feedback in the comments. So, that's it already for today's devlog. The next video will probably not be an Exo Colony Devlog, since I do need more time to refactor and bug fix all the existing systems in the game, and also my mental health forces me to work on different smaller games from time to time. But I have something quite cool in mind for the upcoming devlog, so feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss it. Until then, have a good time and goodbye!